My name's Peter Fraser. I was a graduate of the Officer Cadet School at Portsea. I was posted to 3 RAR in 1967 and deployed into Vietnam later that year. We arrived 2 days after Christmas and spent a long time establishing the base because we were a new battalion.
And then Peter, that first period, that first month, what insertion into country did you do?
We did introduction to the way the war was fought. We'd not spent terribly much time in helicopters before we went to Vietnam, and yet helicopters were the principal movement for people and supplies and wounded and so on. And we also had to practice formation in various forms of country that we'd never operated in before. We'd never operated in rubber plantations. We'd never operated in bamboo. And all of those things had to be dealt with because we were going to be there for 12 months. In addition to that, we had the requirement to do the regular patrols in front of the battalion and so on.
And then Peter, you came up at the end of that first month, end of January. You were on standby. We were
ready reaction company for the task force. This was immediately before the TET Offensive. The TET Offensive was the Buddhist New Year, and in previous years, both warring sides, or all warring parties, had declared a ceasefire in honour of the TET period. And whilst the press would have people believe that it was a complete and utter surprise, the scale of it was a surprise. The Americans and we had noticed vast movements of significantly more people than more enemy than previous moving towards Saigon. Our C Company had been attached to 7 RAR because 7 RAR required additional support. We were Ready Reaction Company, and on the 1st of February, our company commander was called to Task Force headquarters by the acting Task Force commander and briefed that he'd been approached by the American colonel who controlled the American forces within Phuoc Tri province, the province in which we operated, and said that they had come under attack, and he felt that the force was a reinforced company, and could we support him.
What was involved in being a reactionary force? What did it mean for you?
Had to be prepared, fully equipped to go out, had first-line ammunition, what it's called, just to be alert and not to be on patrol anywhere else. So we went as a complete unit.
So when you were normally in the base, how much ammunition did you normally have with each soldier?
We always carried frontline ammunition, and for a soldier carrying a self-loading rifle and an SLR, he had 3 magazines of 20 rounds. The book says that he also took 100 rounds in bandoliers. Early photos showed these cotton bandoliers draped around everybody. So we were fully committed to go. If there was anything special in an operation, we had additional things. We were issued with starlight scopes when we went to Balmoral so that we could see at night time. But that was the only time we took anything other than what we normally did.
Can you tell us about Ba Ria? So you got alerted that you needed to send a reactionary force?
Yep. During the Battle of Long Tan, the Bin Ba rubber had been used by the enemy as a site for mortars to mortar the task force position. Early on the 1st of February, that base plate position was used again. And so the original requirement from Task Force headquarters was to send a platoon out to examine if the enemy was still there, and if so, to deal with them. And Doug Dick's 1 platoon was sent on that. The company commander was then called into Task Force headquarters, advised that a call had been made by the American colonel controlling the province. They had what he believed was an overstrength company, and could the Australians provide support. The company commander said to the Deputy Task Force Commander, "Sir, my 1 platoon's gone. Should I wait for them to come back?" No, Major," said the Colonel. The force multiplier effect of 2 Australian platoons and a troop of armoured personnel carriers, M113 APCs, would be more than enough. You'll be right, away you go. And duly the APCs arrived. and it was a 3 Troop A Squadron 3 Cav, commanded by Roger Tingley, a graduate of the Officer Cadet School at Portsea, and we loaded on and away we went. It was summer season, the hot season in Vietnam, and a lot of blokes enjoyed sitting on the top of the APCs as they drove along. It was cooler and there was more room inside. In terms of going to where we were going, given that there was a large enemy force, the company commander decided that we would all be in the vehicle and head into town. Decision was made by the company commander and Roger Tingley that if there was any attack on the vehicles on the way in, we'd just drive through and get to where we were going. The concern was there would be an ambush, we would deploy, we'd be held up, succumb to the ambush. And so away we went, and we got into Ba Ria. We got out of the APCs, went into all-round protection, and the company commander went in and was briefed by the American colonel on what his expectations were.
And while he was getting briefed, was there anything, were you under fire, or was anything happening?
Well, it was very exciting. There was small arms fire going on all around, helicopters and planes. It was a very busy period. There were a number of enemy bodies where we got out of the APC. Shortly after we got out and went into all-round defence, a motorbike came out of a side street with a rider riding with a pillion passenger facing the other way with an AK-47 and fired at us. Well, one of the APC crew commanders gave him a burst of 50 cal and they were both killed. The company commander then came out. We then went down to an area where the American and Australian members of the force that was in Ba Ria, called the PRU House, and down we went there, and it was an area where there were quite substantial homes, solid brick homes, tiled roofs. The initial orders group was that company commander Horry Howard said to Harry Claassen, the ANL compound, the location of ammunition and weapons for the South Vietnamese forces, was under attack. There was an enemy force there already, and the concern was it would be overrun, and he was to go and deal with that. And away he went. That left 2 platoon with company headquarters. The task I was given was to locate and rescue 4 American advisors who were besieged in the house that they were in, and rescue them. They had apparently been under attack for much of the night. There was a series of houses that contained both Australian and American advisors. Those who were out doing doing tasks weren't in the house, but these 4 blokes were and had been besieged for several hours. So the house was identified. The first requirement was to go over and secure the area. And I sent Corporal Spider Williams, who'd served in Vietnam with 1 RAR in its first tour, and a very experienced man. And so I sent Spider across with his section, and he secured the area. And I then went with the second section to cross a road. Instead of going in single file, you go line abreast and you move across, and that way you're not picked off one at a time by someone on your flank. So we were on this side of the road. We need to get to that side of the road. And away we went, and we were halfway across, and we received fire from our left flank, machine gun fire. The section commander was first, I was second, and then there were 4 other people in line, and over we went. A burst of fire hit the section commander, missed me, missed the next bloke, hit the third bloke, and not the other 2. So we very rapidly gathered up the wounded and dragged them off into what's known as a spoon drain. Fultree Province was in the tropics, and huge downpours of rain required huge gutters to clear it all, and these spoon drains afforded some protection to us. So we then get across there, and we need to get the medic, get him across. The APC and the section that was facing that way had engaged the enemy with machine gun and rifle fire, and so the fire ceased coming in. 2 down in terms of the force that was going to deal with all of this. So I gathered up 3 other blokes, 4 of us, and went to the door and tried to open the door, and it was a very exotic wrought iron security door, and I wasn't able to get in, and there was a doorbell, and I pressed the doorbell, and it went ding dong. In Australia, before we left, there was an advertisement for the Avon cosmetic company, and the advertisement went ding dong, Avon calling. When I pressed the button, I thought, oh my Godfather, I'm here to sell cosmetics. Anyway, I banged on the door, and out came this bloke, and I said, "Where's the key?" And he had the key, and he was trembling. Gave me the key, and it fell down, so I had to foss it down and get the key, open the thing. In we went. There was a room, well furnished. The main feature of it was a very large oak table. There were these four blokes were behind that table, pistols in hand. Weapons had been discarded because they'd run out of ammunition. They'd been under fire for a significant period of time. And the bloke in charge was a major, and I said, "Where are they?" And he said, "We think they're coming in through the back window." Said to two of the fellas, "Go and grab the medic, bring him in. These blokes were all wounded." And I took Private Don Jessen with me. So we walked down a short passageway and opened the door, and there was a bedroom with a bed, a wardrobe, a bedside table, and two enemy climbing in the window with four more behind them. So there was one bloke being helped in, and I shot him, and the fellow who was helping him in killed the first bloke, wounded the second bloke, and the other four out there started to climb out. We've walked into a room. I don't know whether he's the first bloke coming in or whether there's someone in the room. And the last thing I wanted was to go out and to be caught in between two forces. So I'm looking under the bed, and I said to Don Jessen, "Stick your bayonet in." The wardrobe was very small, and I said, "Stick your bayonet in, and if there's anyone there, you'll be able to deal with him." So very slow talking Queenslander stuck his bayonet in, pulled it off, and the door of the wardrobe came out. There were three very nice suits in there, but no one. I'm at the window at this stage, climbing out the window, saying, come on, Jessen, hurry up." He said, "I can't get my bayonet." I said, well, just take your bayonet off and come out." "Oh, I can't do that." He said, "You'll make me pay for the bayonet." Anyway, by the time I got out there, they're over the fence. So I threw grenades over. The prospect of he and I chasing these blokes was silly, because there was still fire going on, and I had a responsibility for the rest of the platoon. So I went through the house, and Jack Davis, the company medic, corporal, he was in the midst of treating these fellas, as well as treating the other two blokes in the spoon drain. We had wounded as well. Someone had thrown a grenade, and Rod Watson was wounded at that stage, Private Rod Watson. He was also being treated. So when I came back from the house, having done what I'd done, that I came back. The Americans had been taken out at that stage, and Jack Davis was still working. Then went back to working with the two original wounded, and they were taking. There was still small arms fire coming. There was an APC on the other side of the road, and I went to the crew commander and I said, "Move your vehicle over to this spoon drain to give cover to the medical team." And he said, "No." And I said, "What do you mean, no?" He said, "Well, they're firing RPGs. RPGs can do a lot of damage to an APC." And I said, "They're wearing shirts made in 1942, and the cotton doesn't let AK-47 bullets bounce off. Move the vehicle now." So he got on the radio, and he was told, move the vehicle. I'd felt during the day that the APC's crew, I initially thought they were gun shy, but that's not the case. That they were almost reluctant. It turns out that they had a couple of weeks to go, 2 weeks to go. In the last fight we had 6 weeks to go, and whilst we weren't reluctant, it occurred to me what was going through their minds at that stage.
That's a very important thing there, because as you get closer to the end of your time,
you think, am I there? Yeah. That ended our responsibility. We took the wounded back to company headquarters where they were treated, and we continued to search the houses adjacent to this house to see if there were any enemy there. We got sporadic fire. We didn't know whether it was coming from people outside the houses firing at us or inside. And so we had to go from house to house and work on it. We'd never been trained to operate in an urban area. We'd never been trained on house to house things. But we'd seen all the films, and we felt we had enough knowledge. I had two now very experienced section commanders. One was very seriously wounded. He and Private White we never saw again. Their wounds were such that they were repatriated to Australia straight away. And so two exceptionally experienced section commanders, and we went in teams from room to room. We had to search under and behind everything in case they were hiding, and where there were manholes into the ceiling, we had to do that, and Harry's two sections were involved in that. That was a problematic exercise because I'd ordered fixed bayonets very early in the piece. I would imagine if you're in an urban setting in a house and going from room to room, a bayonet would be a handy thing to have. The next task we had from the American colonel was that they had intelligence that the enemy was about to send a company from Dapto, which was the village further away from Ba Ria, and that they were coming to assault the area where he was located. And so we went to an area which was on the route from Vung Tau to Nui Dat. Vung Tau was the administrative base, Nui Dat was the operational base. And the picture theatre was a double-storey, very grand affair. It gave us an opportunity to oversee the area, the paddy fields between Dapto and Ba Ria. And from our perspective, they were going from right to left. This group emerged, and it was a company. They'd been well trained. It was almost like an Australian company. They were in arrowhead formation, well spaced out, and they began their assault. And we engaged them. There was no aircraft available at that time. The aircraft were coming from Bearcat, the home of the 11th Armoured Cavalry Regiment, and they'd gone back to rebomb and refuel. We couldn't use artillery because we were in an urban area, and that would have caused difficulties for the civilian population as well as for us. And so we called in mortars and we engaged them with the weapons that we had. They returned fire, naturally enough. Over the road from the picture theatre, the other side of Route 2, was a series of shanty shops. They were shops made out of beaten oil cans and very flimsy things. So I had Spider Williams go and take all the poplar out and put them into the theatre, which afforded better protection from them if the fight continued. Held them where they were. They weren't able to go any further. They weren't able to leave without being targeted. And next thing we know, along came an aircraft and dealt with them. The aircraft came in and used napalm and rockets, and they were very good at what they did. Subsequently, when we withdrew back to the PRU house, the survivors of that group then came and occupied the picture theatre, and the picture theatre was, as I said, 2 stories, and they actually got on there and they had a 50 cal, a 12.7 millimetre machine gun, hoping, I would imagine, to deter or defeat the helicopter gunships and the aircraft. Anyway, one of the aircraft came in, identified this position, and fired rockets at the theatre. In doing so, putting huge holes in the theatre. It gets a little confusing at that stage. Harry had called in an airstrike on a force that several of the locals had told him were coming to attack the ANL compound where he was, and he called an airstrike in there. He called a second airstrike for another force coming from another area, and what I'm not too sure about is whether that was the group that we dealt with from the theatre. Ba Ria was a large market town, but the proximity of where Harry was and where we were, I'm unfamiliar with. So it could well be that the second lot of aircraft that came in and dealt with the 12.7 on the theatre was the one that Harry called in, or whether it was dictated by the FAC, the forward air controller, who was flying around allocating tasks to the jets.
Yeah, because I think it's quite an important thing, that because there's so much confusion about what's happening.
Absolutely.
And the communication is so difficult to get understanding of exactly what's happening.
It is. Again, to come back to Harry's situation, Harry arrived with 3 APCs, ramps down. The group in his APC come out. The other 2 were empty. The APCs hadn't taken the sections that they were meant to take. Standing in the bay of the APC, his radio operator, there was a white phosphorus flare that went up, and a piece came down and lodged between the radio and the back of the radio operator. He shrugged off the radio, as I would have done, and leapt out of the APC. Next thing, up goes the ramp, and away goes the 3 APCs. No, we're off, no, good on you, just away he went. And here's Harry, no radio. 1 section rather than 3 sections. There were 19 enemy already in an area that had come and occupied a section of the A&L compound, and no communications. So he went into the local, into the buildings and found a Vietnamese unit, and they were carrying a very old 10 set. Which was the radio set prior to the one that we were using, the 25 set. We used that 10 set to communicate and tell the company commander, I'm here, I'm right, can you send the sections back, my 2 other sections to me? And then called in the air support that he called in. To say that everybody knew exactly what was happening all the time in Ba Ria is not to tell the truth, because there were bursts of fire everywhere. Some were clearly aimed at us and some clearly weren't.
Yeah, but I think that's often the case.
Yes.
So I think it's not. It wouldn't have just been Ba Ria. I think it's any battle.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's the difficulty of managing and trying to make decisions, because you're making it on
the information that you currently have.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
It's very easy to look back afterwards and say, well, we should have done this or we should have done that.
Indeed. In a lull, when we came back, we reoccupied the area where we had been previously, and along the road came an old Vietnamese woman, and she was wagging her finger at us, and she walked along carrying whatever she was carrying, and none of us spoke Vietnamese, which was something that should have not have happened. We should have had someone with some language skills, and she kept on pointing VC, VC, VC. We assumed, given that the number of grenades had been thrown, that the enemy may be closer in the area where she was pointing. Many of these houses were surrounded by masonry walls, and in the house where I'd shot the early 2, the wall was above head height. And that was the case also on the other side of the road. It was thought perhaps that the enemy, she was telling us the enemy was next door, so we lobbed a couple of grenades over the fence to see if it was. As it turned out, a fortnight later, when we got the summary of what happened, they were 4 houses along a road that was at right angles to where we were. And they didn't know where we were initially, and we certainly didn't know where they were.
So then once you'd got back and secured your position, what happened?
The company commander was advised that the CIA agent's home was being attacked. He had a requirement to make safe all of the files that he had and be evacuated. And he had a Nung guard, a Chinese mercenary guard, and he'd been wounded. And so could we go down and get him? Harry was still doing his thing. So down we went with 2 APCs. I kept 1 section remained with company headquarters to give protection of them. I took 2 sections with me. We went down in the APCs. That we stopped in fact it was 2 rows down. It was 200 metres further on from where we were. One APC came to a crossroad, propped there. There was a vacant field, and the CIA agent's house was there, and it was a junction of the 2 roads. One APC was left there. I deployed both sections to give all-round protection to that armoured personnel carrier, and went with the troop commander into the house to get everything, organise everything, move all this stuff out, and get this CIA bloke Johnson out. And with us at that stage was the bloke, Warrant Officer Pirelli, Australian Army training team, and Warrant Officer, and he was there giving us some support. He was part of the team that worked with Johnson. They worked closely together. We're loading stuff into they're loading stuff into the APC. All of a sudden, an RPG fires at the APC that's at the junction of the road. Wounded the crew and members of the crew. So the troop commander's APC, Tingley, jumps into his crew commander's seat. In goes GIA bloke, in goes Pirelli, and they head off. I then moved by foot to make sure that my blokes were all right and providing all-round protection. The troop commander pulls the APC next to the APC that was down. My blokes are firing. Tingley was firing. They'd opened the door of his APC. There was a ramp that could be dropped with the APC, but it contained a door. So instead of dropping the ramp, opened the door, getting his two crew from the damaged APC into his. I'm standing with the platoon headquarters, ensuring that everything's going on there. All of a sudden, I'm lying on the ground, got a ringing in my ears, and was quite stunned. And I could only see out of my left eye, and I wiped my right eye, and I've got a handful of blood. And I thought, I turned 21 a fortnight ago. How much have I got left? And it wasn't me. It was in fact Johnson. And the APC that the troop commander's APC, Tingley was firing his gun. Johnson was standing in the bay firing as well. And the RPG hit him in the head.
So that was a second RPG. So the first...
it was the second RPG. Yeah. The first RPG damaged the first APC. Yeah, the second RPG was fired at the second APC. As soon as I've done that, I'm grabbed and dragged into the spoon drain, and there's small arms fire coming up, still engaging the APCs and the sections of mine that were responding. And who's got me? One Kevin Allender, affectionately known as Porky, and Mel Lowe, the radio operator, and they dragged me into the spoon drain, steadied my nerves, and I said to Porky, "Very brave of you to do that, Porky." He said, "Oh, don't get too excited. You've got the cigarettes." Otherwise, we're out of them. So Kevin Allender, very, very funny man. We were at Canungra on our lead-up exercise to come to go to Vietnam. At Canungra, everything is done the hardest way possible, because this is what you may find when you get there. So I'm called to an orders group, and I said to Porky, infantry never do anything alone. You're paired with someone. I was paired with Porky. He was the man runner, and his job was to be my protector, afford protection to me, security to me, but also if the radio, I had a radio to the company, but if I needed to talk to the sections, we had to do verbally. So if they were too far away, Porky had to do it. So we were all carrying our packs, and I'm called to an O group. And I said to an orders group where the commanders come in and sit down and are told by the whoever it is what's going to happen. And I said to Porky, "Look, whack me out a meal. I'll eat that while I'm writing the orders, and then we're away." And he said, "No." And I said, "What do you mean no?" He said, "I can't." I said, "Why can't you?" He said, "You're carrying the food." And I said, "What do you carry?" He said, "I'm carrying the bedding." And guess what weighed more? I could tell you several stories of Private Kevin Allender. So Johnson's blown to pieces, and poor old Pirelli, he was burnt from well, we could only see from the waist up. From the waist up, his right arm sort of ended midpoint, very, very badly burnt, and he's halfway out the door. At that stage, both vehicles are untenable, and so I said, "Right, everybody back into Johnson's house." So the two crews from the APCs, my blokes covered them as they went in, and then the first section I took in, I put Jim Sonigo's gun on the top of the wall, and he then gave fire support while the rest of the section, the rest of the platoon came in, and there we were. It's 3-ish, 4-ish in the afternoon. We've got two APCs. We're in a compound that would be very difficult to defend, because to defend it you had to be where Jim Sonigo was, and that was sitting on the top of a fence at an easy target. There we are with the two APCs at the road junction. Jack Davis, the medic. His job was to look after the wounded. He said, I need to go and see if Pirelli's all right. And I said, Jack, that's an exceedingly dangerous thing to do. He said, that's my job, I have to do it, and away he went. So he crawled along the spoon drain to get to where the vehicle was, and he rendered what first aid he could to Pirelli, but he was very badly wounded. On the rifle of every soldier was a field dressing taped to the stock, the stock of the rifle, made in 1942. The field dressing. If there was someone wounded, you used his rather than yours because you were using his. He would be repatriated. You needed it if it was you. Anyway, Jack had a full medical kit anyway. Stopped stem bleeding and gave him pain relief. It was impossible to move him. And then came back.
And the APCs at that stage, could they still fire?
No, they could. Their weapons were still working, but the first one wasn't drivable, and the second one was. But the next RPG was going to take the whole thing out anyway. So the decision to move was based on. There were 3 bodies in Tingley's APC. It's an untenable situation to use it as a vehicle. So came back into it. Now we were faced with the prospect. What happens if we're still here in another 2 hours and it starts to get dark? We've got 2 vehicles out there, one with a 30 calibre machine gun, one with a 50 calibre machine gun. We're beside a masonry wall. A 50 cal is going to make very short work of a masonry wall. At core training, we were shown the effect of an M60, firing a belt of 50 rounds at a brick structure. And after 40 rounds, the bricks disintegrate and the next lot of rounds go through it. So the prospect of having a 50 cal firing at us was a less than happy situation. At this stage, Charlie starts to groan again, and Jack said, I've got to go back. Away you go, and away he went. Same thing along the spoon drain, and all he could give him was more pain relief, which he did. When he came back, Jack wouldn't mind me telling you, Jack had a pronounced stutter when he got excited, and he explained that when he went the first time, there were bullets glancing off that were shallow. In the flight path of the rounds. When he went the second time, it was from a higher elevation, and he said, I think it came from those palm trees. There were 4 palm trees there. So we engaged 4 palm trees, from which fell 3 rifles and 2 enemy. That's where much of the firing had come from that we hadn't perceived at that stage. Shortly after he came back, as I said, between the APCs and where the house we're in there was a tin shed. The door of the tin shed opened and a little hand waved a shirt. It was a child who was in the shed when all of this happened. They felt that they were probably safe where they were. It was a tin shed. Anyway, he was with Grandpa, and Grandpa had been shot, and one of the loose rounds that were being fired. So we called out to him, come, and we gave fire support from Jim Sonico's gun as well as others on other vantage points, and the boy and the grandfather hobbled back in, and so Jack patched him up. We gave the kid chocolates, and we had our rations with us, so we fed him biscuits and chocolates, and Grandpa was in a bad way, so Jack treated him, and we gave him pain relief, obviously, and addressed the bullet had gone straight through, so we cleaned him up. Anyway, we've got them now as well. We're on the radio with the company commander, and Horry said, clearly we're going to have to get you out. We didn't have the firepower to do it. Harry was still engaged in what he was doing, and so he went to the American colonel and said, we need one of your forces to come and assist us. And a group from the 52nd Ranger Battalion came. There were tiers of expertise within the Vietnamese army. The very best were at the DMZ. The best were in the areas where the enemy was. By the time you got down to Ba Ria, these kids were nothing more than Boy Scouts with rifles. A wonderful title from the 25th Regiment, but they were effectively Boy Scouts with rifles. So Horry said to they were commanded by an old bloke wearing a beret carrying a walking stick, considered himself exceedingly French, although he was Vietnamese, and he had an American advisor. And Horry explained that what was needed was a force to occupy the area where my two sections had been, provide sufficient fire to the enemy to allow us to withdraw through them and couple the APCs up and drive them away. Tingley's APC was drivable. We didn't know whether the was or wasn't. As it turned out, it wasn't, and it had to be coupled, and that was going to take time. So we needed a rather large force with a rather copious ammunition in order to give us the cover that required. Along came the 52nd Battalion, and they adopted the position and began to fire and received significant fire back, and they melted away. And so that wasn't going to be a solution to us. I think that they were kids, and they didn't have the skills to do what was required of them. 2 days later, both the American advisor and the old bloke who commanded it were found dead. So obviously they'd asked too much of someone, and that was the response. Anyway, Harry arrives. So all of a sudden we've got 3 sections now who can stand and fight and know what it is, and that's exactly what happened. Harry engaged while the APCs were coupled together, and then through Harry's covering fire, we withdrew, and then we went back to the headquarters where Horry had taken the initial briefing. And so we had dead, we had wounded, and we needed to do something. Nighttime was coming. The American colonel said that what he really needed us to do was to occupy the bridge at the east of the town in case that was used as a vector for a large assault from the enemy. So what we had to do was to take the bodies out of the APC. We needed a fighting vehicle. So we approached an Australian captain who'd been with us all day. He was part of the force that Perello belonged to. He was a full-time Army Reserve, Australian Army Reserve, and the documents we were taking off the enemy we were giving to him, and we assumed he was handing them over to the Vietnamese forces. He was tasked by Horry to take the bodies, secure them in an area so that we could reclaim them the next day. One of Harry's blokes, none of my blokes spoke Vietnamese, one of Harry's blokes must have done a course, because when Horry told this bloke what to do, he then said in Vietnamese, not what Horry had told him. He said, "Throw these bastards in the gutters and let's move on." So Horry suggested to him that he did what Horry wanted him to do. So the vehicle's empty and away we go. But we got wounded. And so what we have to do is to get a helicopter to come in. Previously, the APCs earlier in the day had taken the early wounded that we had down to Van Kep, where there was a helipad, and they were taken down to One Ostfield Hospital in Vung Tau. But we couldn't get to Van Kep because the dark was upon us. So what we had to do was to get them to come in. Contacted Task Force headquarters. No, we haven't got a helicopter. No, we've got nothing we can do for you. Listening to this, in the officers' mess, I think it's 161 Recce Flight, the Australian force that flew non-armed helicopters. Having a beer was a bloke who heard what was happening, heard where there was wounded, put his beer down, jumped in his helicopter, and away he went. And when he was in the helicopter and started it, his commanding, his OC said, well, where are you going? What are you doing? He said, "I'm going to debris." "No, you're not." He said, No, it's night time, it's too dangerous. And away he went. Roger, lovely man. Met up with him at a reunion 20 years later. In order to get him in, we had to move to the centre of the town, deal with the cables that supported the structure that the telecommunications required, the radio communications. And we had to cut those down so that he could come in. When we first got there, we were fired upon by 2 young kids who'd been put in a sentry post above, and we returned fire and then told them we're Australian, and they stopped firing at us. And then we had to cut these wires. We had to make it such that they could come in. We had 2 wounded, you could only take 1 at a time. And so that's what happened. He took the wounded. So anyway, second wounded goes, then we go and occupy. It's now dark.
Sorry, just coming back to that.
Yep.
It's interesting that both occasions on Pinaroo and Ba Ria, where you needed evacuation, both times there were pilots came in who weren't necessarily tasked to do it. They just purely volunteered because they knew you had problems on the ground.
Yep. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. That's how he should have been. Very brave thing to do. Off we go to the bridge. Harry's leading. So we get up there. Harry is tasked then to go the other side of the bridge and make sure that everything over there is free of what it is. It's night. And so we called on the 161 Field Battery New Zealand guns who supported our battalion for the entire time we were there, and they fired illumination. And prior to the first illumination round landing, Harry's moving across, and 2 young Vietnamese soldiers in a sentry box at the other side saw movement, assumed it was enemy, and fired. And to his great credit, Harry stood there and called out "Uktaloy, Australian," and they stopped firing. Had it been me, I may not have had the presence of mind. I might have retaliated. But anyway, Harry went across. That was fine. Back we come, and we're thirsty because we ran out of water a long time ago. So a water party is dispatched. We're on this side. On that side is the market. It's a big market town. And so there was a path leading down to the market, and we bought the water bottles were taken and filled, and we drank them, and they filled again. Oh, and it was wonderful. Next morning when we looked down, that was where the butcher was, and he'd throw the carcasses into the river. God knows what we drank. Anyway, we were very glad for it. No action during the night. Stood to. I had to put one of my groups down 50 metres from where we were to make sure we had protection down there, which we did, and we went into normal routine. So we stood to when we got there. When the illumination had finished, we on 50% rotation, not much sleep, but it was very welcome when we got it. The next morning, B Company arrived, and with a new lot of APCs, and we were very glad to see them.
They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.